And now, your host, Couch Tomato!
Hey, I'm Couch Tomato and I'm joined by...
Oh.
Welcome to Stuff for Movie Buffs. And today we're talking...
Transformers The Last Night.
Well, technically we're not. By the way, before we get started today, guys, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or wherever you go for your podcast. Is Stuff for Movie Buffs. Moving along, some backstory. Beginning of the year, Hulk, you knew this. My New Year's resolution was I was not going to support movies at the box office that I really didn't have a passion seeing.
Yeah.
I just wasn't going to support movies blindly. Because I felt like I did that in 2016 and the year prior, where it's like, it's awesome trailer. I'm just going to see it to see what happens. And sometimes when you do that, I think you send a green light out to Hollywood to green light more sequels or, installments into that franchise. So if I don't think something's going to be worth my time, I'm definitely not giving it worth my any of my time. And Transformers is one of those franchises. Now, it's a little bit of a soft spot for you, Hulk. I think this is one of your favorite films, I believe.
No.
So, I mean, favorite franchises at least. So are you going to see Transformers this weekend?
Nah, not willingly, unless, a family member or friend offers. But I wasn't like, oh, man, I got to go see this movie.
All right, just answer the question with a yes or no. Are you going to see Transformers?
No, I am not.
Are you sure? Because when I talk to you...
I am sure.
It sounded like you were going to see it, but I don't want to get you nervous on the podcast.
I was not. I clearly remember saying, yeah, I was probably going to see it because my brother wanted to go see it.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. It sounds like you were going to see it, and it sounds like you're just backing out.
I'm not backing out. I'm not hyped about this movie.
All right, man. I just don't want you to feel like you have to fit in because on this podcast, we respect everyone's opinions, and we would never want to, shame you for liking this trash.
Thank you.
Yeah, but Transformers The Last Night, number one, the title seems so 2008. Every time I want to say it, it's like I'm almost trying to say Transformers the Dark Last Night or something. It just screams,
or the Last Night Rises. Or
oh my God, it's like, and they do that a lot because Age of Extinction. You know that word. I can't say that word properly.
Extinction.
Yeah, that word. I used to always mix it up with Age of Ultron because it felt like a lot of ages were coming out that year. And Michael Bay does that. He comes out with whatever the flavor title is. He just kind of throws it on his movie. And it felt like he probably had this script sitting around since 2008. But so keeping up with my New Year's resolution, not touching this franchise anymore, at least in theaters. We'll kind of get a chance to talk about how we felt about some of the previous movies. I'll go first. Number one, I thought was decent, to be honest. I expected cheese and I got it.
Yeah.
Number two was very horrible, in my opinion.
Worst one.
I almost got kicked out my fraternity. Shout out to Phi Beta Sigma. But I suggested this movie as a Brotherhood event. And I almost got kicked out the Brotherhood. So I was very, very, kind of standoffish when it came to people asking me for movie suggestions ever since then.
Dark of the Moon. Brotherhood for not kicking you out because that movie is really bad.
And I used to love everything like blockbuster movies because growing up, I didn't visit my first theater, movie theater, till I was old enough to drive. And I got my car when I was 16. So my parents would always take us to the drive-in. And the drive-in it's cool. It's a novelty thing. But I would always, especially being a movie buff, I always wanted to be in the theater setting. And I just never got to because my parents Haitian parents are very strict. And it's like, they would never let you leave the house without supervision anyway.
Nope.
So it's like, I was only around to be around the neighborhood, which was more dangerous than the theater, to be honest. But nonetheless, when I actually got chances to go to the movie theaters, it felt like everything I watched was amplified. Not necessarily the movie being good, but the experience, the movie going experience. So, Revenge of the Fallen was one of the first times I was like, oh man, this is crap. I'm actually hating a movie in the theaters. I've rarely had that happen to me. The year prior, or 2 years prior, it happened with Spider-Man 3. But then with Revenge of the Fallen, it happened. And then that same year, X-Men Origins. So then I was like, that's when I became very selective about my, what I pay to see. But Dark of the Moon, I actually thought I thought it was okay. I didn't mind it, to be honest.
Yeah,
but
here.
with Age of the word I can't pronounce. Extinction.
Extinction.
I tried it again. I can't say it. But,
just say Age of Ultron.
Yeah, Age of Ultron with Transformers Age of Ultron. Basically, is when I started really asking myself, why am I still watching these movies in theaters? I need to chill out. And when this movie came out, everybody's like, oh, the trailer looks awesome. I'm like, all of the trailers look awesome. Yeah. And to be honest, Michael Bay is probably the best trailer maker next to Zack Snyder when it comes to Hollywood. So that's how I feel about the franchise. But once again, this is one of your favorite franchises. So let me know how you felt about part 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I'm right with you with all of them. I think part 1 is probably like my favorite out of the 4 that I've seen. Just really like the character, with Shia LaBeouf and Optimus Prime, the nostalgia, all that stuff really worked. 2 was horrible, one of the worst movies I've ever seen in theaters. 3 was redeeming, like I actually liked it. I really liked it. And then 4 was just like, it was just too much. Like I just felt like now you're just too much branding, beer and America.
I don't even care about the branding, but when you start,
it was just too much. Putting
a movie at a runtime like that, I think now you're just like really trying to be rude, and it's like that's you're insulting my time. Like, come on, man, have some time value. I don't think anybody's that important to have a movie that long. I don't remember how long it was, but it was close to 3 hours. It felt like, and that's when I draw the line. I'm like, I hate runtimes that long.
And especially with no like real acting or it's just destruction all nonstop. So it's just like, ugh.
And to be honest, I think his movies would be better if they cut off some of the runtime. It's like you get bored after a while. It's just but yeah, like so we're not watching The Last Night. Wanted to make sure. I'm just not watching. I wanted to find something else fun to do this week on the podcast, and now we get to go on a little bit of a time travel trip. If you grew up in the 90s, you'll be familiar with some of these titles. But so I wanted to bring up the topic because you know who owns the rights to the Transformers franchise, right?
Fresh on memory.
All right, hey, bro, have you ever heard of Hasbro?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, awesome. They own that, but they also own a couple of other properties I'm not sure you're familiar with. So now there's always been speculation, and I think they've kind of like axed it recently. I'm not really sure. I haven't been keeping up with the headlines. But if, when people saw what the Avengers were doing, where they were basically putting all their different properties together to make one cinematic universe, a lot of people wanted to apply that to some of the other franchises. Like, oh, wow, it would be so awesome if Fantastic Four groups up with X-Men because Fox owns it. Yeah. So it got me, another rumor that, as young as it's been circling for like the last 2 years, especially when people thought Rock was like a Band-Aid on any franchise and he could fix something. I was the only one that was making sense saying, no, he isn't, because he's done a lot of bad movies and people kept looking at me like I was a hater. But then Baywatch came out and people were like, oh, wow, Couch was right. So, I'm off the subject though. But, Hasbro also owns G.I. Joe. And was my franchise. I wasn't really into Transformers. G.I. Joe was my thing, especially with the the PSAs at the end. It just taught me a lot of life lessons. I had the underwear and all. But I would like to see these universes mesh well together, and we're probably going to start a series like whenever we're not, going to, dedicate the podcast to a movie, a new release. We'll probably dedicate it to something like this. Franchises we would like to see create cinematic universes. And this week, we're going to be talking about Power Rangers, so we'll talk about that a little later. But first, let's, this story at least has some legs. How would you feel about a crossover with G.I. Joe and Transformers?
To me, that would be perfect. Like, you would have potentially The Rock. I'm not sure what
the first thing you go for.
But what I just said. Can I just finish my thought process, please? All right, you would potentially have The Rock. I don't know what they're gonna do with Channing Tatum's character. I don't know if he's dead or not. But let's say you have Channing Tatum, and then you combine that.
Cut him out because he died. Yeah, but he died the last movie.
But I remember like the rumor was that he was supposed to come back if they had like the sequel.
Never heard of that. And he clearly laid down on that grenade. That's ridiculous.
Sworn they was gonna try to bring him back anyway. But even if you like just the way the show and the characters lend itself, it could work on a big screen. Because I think sometimes you see it now with these movies, they're having a tough time with like the human characters, like just finding a significant storylines to combine with the Transformers. So if you could have like where the G.I. Joe and Transformers are somehow together to fight the Decepticons and all that stuff.
You potentially got an Oscar-worthy picture on your hands.
But you have a nice summer blockbuster that I can actually pay to go see instead of just...
Even if it was bad, I would watch
exactly.
it. It sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
It's like, and not only that, I would actually give them my money because it's another franchise that they own. Don't know if you heard of this critically acclaimed number, but Battleship is another thing that they own as well.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I actually would pay to see them join the universes with Battleship, Transformers, and G.I. Joe. The only thing that would kind of piss me off is because both Transformers and the G.I. Joe franchise were politically driven to where they've had meetings with the president. The president has made a couple of cameos, and people would ask, hey, why is there two different presidential regimes within the same time time frames? Don't know if they ever said an exact year in G.I. Joe, so you could kind of set it up to where, oh no, everything that you've watched is taking place. Well, no, they showed modern vehicles, so you can't really do that.
Yeah.
But
there's ways
I'm
around
willing
it.
to forget, sweep that under the rug.
If Fox could do what they did with Wolverine, like with all the messed up timelines, I'm sure, like, you know what I'm saying?
I don't think people would mind.
Yeah.
I don't. And you would potentially, like the same reason people love Fast and the Furious is like, it's ridiculous.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. It's like, I would, like this franchise more if they did the same thing. Don't try to like make sense of it.
Nope.
Just go with it. You're not trying to win
have
Oscars
fun with
here.
it. Explosions. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
So I definitely think this is a good idea. So that's that. It's probably not going to happen because let me stop. I was about to say something. I was going to say I don't really mind the G.I. Joe one. The first one
was not too bad. Like, it was actually, like, okay. Like, I just thought they needed to fix some things, like, if in the sequel. But then they didn't do that, and then it just...
Because at the time, that's the same time frame you had movies like Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four coming out. So I'm saying, when you compare it to its peer group...
It did pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, and also you had Marvel Cinematic Universe starting. So that's... I think you're comparing them to the... Patriots from a, NFL parable perspective. But yeah, like there was a lot of bad movies that came out of that time frame. And I didn't think G.I. Joe was the worst.
Me either.
However, when it came down to like Battleship, definitely one of the worst flops ever made. And Transformers, it makes money, but they're horrible films collectively as a group when you like pile them all together. So, I would like for them to do something like this. The only other thing, go ahead.
No, it's like with these studios, it's like they need some fresh. This is gonna be the lowest box office out of all the movies. Like it's getting lower and lower and lower, and this is the worst critically, panned out of all of them. So,
are you talking about Transformers, or are you talking about the year?
Transformers, like the last night, is getting killed. This is gonna be the lowest box office they made opening, and this is the worst reviewed so far.
But all of them start off with horrible reviews.
No, I know, but this is like worse than the Age of Extinction. Worse, you know what I'm saying?
It's definitely going to hit number one. But what's its competition?
No, it still has to do with Wonder Woman, who has legs. Baby Driver. I'm trying to think.
Baby Driver isn't out till next week.
Okay, then it just has to do with Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I still think this movie's going to be like.
No, it's going to be number one, but it's not. What I'm saying is just comparable to the other Transformers films, this is the lowest opening they've had.
And that's still, I'll take that because the other Transformers openings were pretty legendary. So that's what I'm saying. I don't really know what we're comparing it to. When you're comparing it against itself, it's almost an uphill battle.
No, I understand that. But at the same time, you want to see, like, for instance, if you're Guardians of the Galaxy, you want to make sure that Guardians of the Galaxy 2 makes more than Guardians of the Galaxy 1. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to have some... You know what I'm saying? Something to bring to the marketing table.
By the time I get to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 4, 5, I don't really expect some of those same numbers to be consistent. That's what I'm trying to say. But with with this one though, like I did hear rumors like they spent no, never mind. I heard a rumor that when it comes to TV spending, Transformers has spent the most out of any movie this year. But I don't know if you compare that budget to previous installments. I don't know if that's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be kind of sad if they spent more on their budget this time around.
Yeah.
Which I don't believe to be true. I just think Age of Ultron, I just can't say the name, so I'm gonna just stick with that for the rest of the podcast. I think Transformers Age of Ultron, basically they spent more of a budget on that. But moving off that subject with Transformers, what other franchise would you like to see create a cinematic universe?
I remember, well, we were talking about Power Rangers, and then you mentioned like some shows that we used to watch back in the day, and it was funny because when you said those names, they all sounded familiar, and I was just like, and you were just like, oh, are you sure that you remember? And I was just like, yeah, just as soon as I see them, like I'll know it. I'll be like, and then once you mentioned like specifically VR Troopers for me, it was just like, whoa, like it was just like, I can't believe I totally forgot about this show.
And to be fair, we got to be sensitive to some of the folks out there who didn't grow up in the 90s, because not all of them are familiar with these franchises.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we'll be talking about Power Rangers, and how they should build a cinematic universe around their properties. So Power Rangers is owned by Haim Saban, and back in the 90s, for kids who especially didn't have cable, me and Hulk being like prime representatives of that demographic, Fox 29 was life to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, they had these a couple of shows that were Power Ranger wannabes, but you couldn't call them Power Ranger wannabes because Haim Saban owned the property. One was Beetleborgs. The other was Mask Rider. And there was also a show called VR Troopers. So I think those properties, when you tie them into the Angel Grove troupe, would go on to make record numbers at the box office. Even if it wasn't, I would show up to watch that train wreck, because some of this probably wouldn't fit. But we're gonna try to convince you guys why these guys are definitely worth a Google. I was surprised you knew these franchises, Hope, because I just thought that they were something that was like forgotten memory. And I'm like, well, a lot of people don't know Mask Rider. A lot of people don't know VR Trooper.
There was at one point where I liked them more than Power Rangers, and which is scary because like I realized I can't believe I forgot this show. Like I completely forgot it. And then once I saw the opening, I was just like, yo, this was like my crack. Like the
theme song was on point.
Yeah.
And the theme song for all of these except Mask Rider is on point. So let me just kind of give everyone a brief history lesson, and I'll go through like a mini plot synopsis, I guess. This is going off of the top of my head, so feel free to IMDb these guys or Google to see what you can find. But if you grew up in the 90s, you're familiar with the town called Charterville. And in that town, there were 3 typical average kids who loved to read their comic strips, got their wish, and they became the Big Bad Beetleborgs. Beetleborgs! So that's actually part of the theme song. They had an awesome theme song too. With Big Bad Beetleborgs, were you a fan?
Not necessarily. Like it was just like I vaguely watched it. Like it was just like whatever.
You don't know what you're missing because they ended up going metallic. So wow, you missed out on 2 great seasons. And Haim Saban also owned the rights to this show called Mask Rider. And I actually stayed on board with for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I stayed on board for Zeo, stayed on board for Turbo. When they went into space, had to jump ship. I was getting a little bit too old, and Toonami was getting a little bit more popular. But I ended up finding out that Mask Rider eventually cameoed on one of the episodes in space or something like that. I'm not really sure. But what he was is basically about a prince that was sent to Earth. He was raised by 2 suburban parents. And he's learning how to be a normal teenager, which is impossible because he's also morphing into his Power Ranger-like super suit known as the Mask Rider, who beats up dark forces that try to attack Earth. So think of Superman if Superman had a gremlin-like pet and rode a motorcycle. Does that sound awesome to you, Hope?
It kind of does. Like, it's very intriguing. Like, I'm sure there's a way you could clean it up, but I
will say that this is the least interesting out of the group.
Like
so I watched it, but it's the least interesting out of the whole entire group.
No, but I'm thinking, I don't think so. Because I think like there's a way like where you could just make it about the singular character dealing, life as an only child. Am I correct?
Only child, yes. Adopted.
Yes.
And no one asks questions in that town. Just like Smallville, actually.
Yeah, like there's a way you could hide it where he's an outcast. That would be a nice little you know what I'm saying, youth, YA adaptation. I wouldn't.
And we'll talk about why it'll work or won't. But off rip, this won't work because people are naturally going to compare it to Superman. You're just biting Superman. So and the last one, which is VR Troopers. Basically, this kid named Ryan, he grew up without a dad. And it's funny, but it's not really funny because in my neighborhood, a lot of the kids grew up without their fathers.
Pretty much.
And VR Troopers gave those kids hope because he found out his father didn't abandon him. In fact, his father was building virtual reality technology to fight dark forces in a virtual reality dimension, which is kind of like the Matrix versus Zion in that show.
Yeah, and Tron too. Very Tron. like it sounds like Tron.
It does, but except they had a way cooler theme song. So it's actually one of the better theme songs of the 90s.
Yeah, that theme song was just like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, whoa, I can't believe I forgot this.
All right, so if Hollywood does plan to do these franchises, by the way, we'll have ourselves to blame because now we're going to actually mold what that cinematic universe would look like. So why would these premises work today, or why wouldn't they?
Okay, I'll start off with VR Troopers. I think it'll work because if you look at now with VR technology, it's really starting to take off. Like I remember as a kid, I used to think it was kind of whack. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause
it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, the technology just wasn't there yet. But now it's like a lot of viral videos now you see with people, you know what I'm saying, in this, Samsung, playing, messing around with at a Best Buy. So it's just like you have that marketing capability with the technology as well as the source material. You could tweak a little bit and then it can be a success if you know how to market it and people are always hungry for that type of story where, you know what I'm saying, like where it's like you're dealing with another world, where you're dealing with, you know what I'm saying, like how technology can work with, Matrix and, Tron and all this different stuff. Like it definitely could work.
And speaking of Matrix, one thing that you brought up, remember the morphing grid on Power Rangers, the 2017 installment? I think that's a way that you could introduce virtual reality into their world. You don't need to call it VR necessarily, but just kind of use the morphing grid matrix or whatever they were calling it in the film to say, wow, there's something going on in this other dimension. So, whatever. And Zordon kind of introduces them to the pack. But the reason I would say all of these franchises, the premise will work in merging all of these projects together. One thing that always pissed me off about Power Rangers growing up, because I actually, in third grade, from second grade to third grade, I wanted to grow up to be a Ghostbuster. But after I found out that was just impossible because ghosts weren't real, from fourth grade to sixth grade, I wanted to be a Power Ranger.
Third grade to realize that?
No, I'm just saying. I'm really making a joke on how I jumped from Ghostbusters to the idea of being a Power Ranger was more realistic. But definitely my aspiration stopped. But I'm no lie. I was in the third grade and I wanted to be a Ghostbuster / Power Ranger, and this is like a how old are you you're 8 or 8 going on 9. So yeah, I was like a 9-year-old up to when I was 10. I was
I'm gonna be a Ghostbuster. Like I'm gonna get my degree.
Well, not just Ghostbusters, Power Rangers too. Like I just was like, if humans, because at the time there was so much rumors about humans trying to clone the sheep.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just kept hoping that something would go crazy and create like a chaos. And a monster developed, and they were like, "Oh no! Now we need teenagers with attitude." And by that time, I would be like 13, primed to be a teenager with attitude. But the one thing that always took me out of the running wasn't the fact that monsters didn't exist. It was the idea that you had to live in Angel Grove, and I'm from Sunrise, Florida, so it's like, oh man, why can't Rita ever invade smaller cities like the one I'm in? You know what I mean? So with this one, I think it would provide a logical explanation on why the Power Rangers only protect Angel Grove, because you'll have other heroes protecting other parts of America, because America's the only thing that matters in these universes, apparently. But basically, you got the Power Rangers protecting the Midwest, VR Troopers protecting the West Coast, Mask Rider protecting the South, and then you could send the Beetleborgs to the East Coast to do their thing. right? And side note, I think the reason they're going to explain Rita only attacked the Angel Grove is because the Zeo crystals are right in the center, in the heart of the city. So that's kind of going to be their explanation, but I hope they don't do that as a cop-out. So I think the premise on that alone, you need other heroes in other sectors to patrol, kind of like the Green Lanterns to patrol different sectors.
The Marvel type stuff, like they might have like
Black Panther.
Different Avengers teams, Avengers West Coast, or what I'm saying, like just you need to, as you expand universes, with Guardians of the Galaxy protecting space, like as you expand universes, it's gonna be based on territory, so that totally makes sense, like where you could have different teams in different parts of the country.
And what about diversity? Power Rangers has always been known for diversity, and that's a big touchy subject with Hollywood right now. Yep. They're always looking for like ways they can make the diversity feel organic without seeming like they're whitewashing something or they're just, plugging in certain actors. Does this cinematic universe lends itself well to diversity?
Oh yeah. Especially if you're doing it based on territory, then it won't.
Thought you were going to say terrorist. I was going to cut that out and I was going to say that is extremely racist. Oh, wow. But continue.
Wow, the podcast would have took a dark turn. But
yeah, man, I was like getting ready to mute you or censor you, but you brought it back home.
But yeah, like if you're in LA, it would make sense that you would have, a representative, like a teenager from the Hispanic culture, and it wouldn't seem forced because LA has such a predominantly, Hispanic population. Or if you're in the South and and you're in like Alabama or anywhere in the South, if you have like an African American, it won't seem, oh, here's the token black guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, he'll be like, he's actually growing up in the South, dealing with the pressures that, young African Americans deal with. Or if in the Midwest, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you have, the good old American boy, like it won't seem like, a false representation or just like, oh, the generic white dude has to be the lead. Like, no, you're in the Midwest. It would make sense. Like, it would be somebody from there.
It felt that way a little bit in Power Rangers because I'm going to say, coming from an African American, some people found it offensive how the only African American capable of being a Power Ranger had to have a mental disability. And also from a female person of color perspective, both of the females in the movie either were suicidal or had parents who thought they were on drugs.
Yeah,
I'm not that type of person to nitpick and stuff like that, but I'm just saying, like, okay, although Power Rangers had diversity, it wasn't laid out the best.
No, it wasn't. Even with their PR, like I remember there was just like, I think Trini, like she was supposed to be LGBTQ, and then they made like this whole big thing about it, and then when you watch the movie, it's not really addressed. Really,
it's not even that. Like the only thing I'm talking about more person of color too, because she's female, she's person of color.
Yeah.
So honestly, I didn't have no issues with it, but I'm just saying, like,
no, I didn't either. But it's just like they made a big deal about it, but didn't really have much to do with the story at all. You know what I'm saying? And I just felt like they just tried to virtue signal.
Well, this new franchise is going for that. I'm just a teenager and I'm whiny type stuff. So it did make sense with the story that they were doing. But me personally, from a diversity perspective, like I said, grew up back half of the 80s and saw all of the 90s, and I prefer some of those good old 90s stereotypes that I've grown to know and love, like the black kid Roland from Beetleborgs. You remember the guy who snapped his fingers and he was super fast?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't notice till today. That's incredibly racist. I never really put that together, but they could switch around the powers a little bit, but I would like to see him, kind of in a universe with the Power Rangers. So that would kind of be like a plug for, diversity, where you have not only, a person of color as a superhero, which is it's going to, after Black Panther, it'll be a little bit more prominent.
Yeah.
But the girl, I don't remember her name, but the red Beetleborg, she was the strongest one in the group. And how everybody's begging for strong female leads, this girl is literally the strongest one in Beetleborgs. So I think it lends itself well to, diversity, and issues that come up in Hollywood today. There's one issue though. Would you say out of all three of these, Masked Rider is the one that you least remember?
Yeah, that's clear.
That's the one. The only reason I know it so much is because I used to have an Ectophase Activate toy, and that's how I used to morph. Like, I already thought it was weird that a Power Ranger had to, utter the words, "It's morphin' time," and then the putties just stand there and wait for them to finish the sentence. This guy had a longer sentence and morphing process. It was ectophase activate. Not sure if that was the exact words, but a little bit long-winded. But with him, he was like, he came, this is the thing about the 90s. I'm going to introduce a stereotype you probably never heard of. Back then, do you remember when the Gulf War took place?
Mm-hmm. Was it with Bush, right? First Bush? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the time frame?
Can't remember the exact year. Maybe 92, 91?
Good. I'm not imagining things. It was early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a kid, I always realized that America had a certain, like the way they were depicted in film wasn't really, it wasn't in the most positive light, which is Middle Eastern characters. Because I just always felt like, wow, are they trying to send a message to black people that we're only athletic, or, Middle Eastern people that they're aliens or illegal aliens? Because they would, whenever there was like a lot of alien films that came out in the 90s or shows, the person that came from outer space was always Middle Eastern. And I never understood that. Look up Invasion America and look up the actor who played Mass Rider. Not really sure his actual heritage, or, but in that film, they were trying to make him look Middle Eastern because he even had a diamond on his forehead at some time. So I'm like, okay, they're clearly going, for that type of look. So look up Invasion America too. It was like a cartoon that Steven Spielberg was behind, like the cartoon, but the aliens were Middle Eastern, and I thought that was kind of like a message or something. But yeah, that would probably be the only negative stereotype that wouldn't work today.
How you remember these
and
shows?
They would probably end up changing the color of the guy.
I used to love watching the show. Dang.
You see, I got a good memory. Yes, I got a good memory. So, man, exactly. And all of this is in my head. I tell you guys, people always ask, how do you find these 24 reasons? It's the way my head works. Once something goes in, it like stays on the top of my mind. So, man. But definitely, I would like to see Haim Saban pull all of this stuff together. At least if you're going to leave out something, don't leave out anything. Just make these things more modern and make them fit into the Power Rangers universe. And another reason why it would work, comic books are so popular now. They were for losers in the 90s. Like my cousins used to put me up on comic books, and I couldn't tell anybody, from the hood that I was, using comic books. They'd be like, just watch Fox 29. What's wrong with you? So basically, the whole premise of Big Bad Beetleborgs is they go into a haunted house, make a wish from an Aladdin type genie character, and they wish that stuff in the comic book came to life. And that's the reason why they get their powers. So that idea alone, if not to fit in with Power Rangers, it could stand on its own 2 feet as at least a Netflix original series. It's probably not going to make money at the box office, but it will work as a Netflix original series.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially now with the way productions are, it could work.
But I'm definitely anxious to hear from you guys. If you guys ever heard about any of these shows, or at least look up the theme songs on YouTube and tell me what you think. And would you like to see them expand not only the Power Rangers universe, but the main topic of this podcast is, what do you want them to do with the Transformers franchise? Because they make money, so they're profitable. I don't know if Hollywood's going to toss them to the side that easily. But how do you personally think that, Paramount could save this franchise? And is G.I. Joe the answer? So all in all, guys, it's about that time. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. Before you leave, if you like what you heard, share it with a friend on Apple Podcasts or SoundCloud or wherever you go for your podcast. Don't let this be the last time we hear from you or you hear from us. Support the show by giving us a rating and a review on iTunes. It would really mean a lot. Join us next week, and make sure to check out the show notes on where to find us weekly. It's Couch Tomato Films on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter it's Couch Tomato Film. Other than that, peace.